The next thing we do is we work on what is the single underlying driver, the single most important underlying driver of English pronunciation, which is stress. This is the thing which makes English distinctive from almost all the other languages of the world, the way that we make syllables prominent in English. Now, I should just say that the word stress gets used in two distinct ways when we're talking about English pronunciation. The so-called lexical stress, which is the issue about which syllable would receive a stress when the word is spoken. We're not talking about that. We're talking now about sentence stress, which is in a string of syllables, some syllables are more prominent than others. How is it that a syllable appears to be more prominent in English? Now, again, we can look at this from two perspectives. One is to say, what does it sound like? And if you answer that question, you get questions. If you ask that question, you get answers like it's louder, it's longer, there may be a pitch change on it, it may have a clearer vowel quality. All these things make the vowel in a syllable more prominent. But if you take that approach, that's not exactly a teachable thing to do. It's very difficult to say to students, or if you do say to students, make it louder, they might do the exercise in the class, but when they walk out of the class, they haven't really got very much to hang on to. And our experience is that teaching it just saying, make it louder or longer, is not going to be the thing which students can take away and practice on their own, which again, as Rosalind pointed out, is a key thing about pronunciation. The work we do in the class is not going to be what turns students into good speakers of English. It's going to be the work that they do outside of the class on their own. So what we ask instead, taking an articulatory approach, is what do people do with themselves to create stress? Now, within English language teaching, we're kind of halfway there already, in the sense that we have recognized that we don't just play recordings of stress and just expect people to imitate them. We do exercises like getting people to clap. We might, when we write stressed syllables up or stressed words up, we put them in capital letters. We want to give indications to people that there's something different about a stressed syllable. But of course, a clap isn't the thing which creates a stress in the voice. We're still not getting at the underlying thing that native speakers do which creates stress. And we should be teaching that directly. So the first question we have to ask is, what is stress? Well, Peter Roach is a phonetician who recently retired from the University of Reading, who's a professor of phonetics there. He pointed out that stressed syllables are produced with greater effort than unstressed syllables. This effort is manifested in the air pressure in the lungs. So it's all about the respiratory system. And then the effect of this, by putting the greater effort into the lungs, the effect is you get things which are louder and longer and have pitch changes and so on and so forth. But the actual driver for this is what you're doing with yourself to pressurize the air in your lungs. And another phonetician, J.C. Catford, who was an English teacher before he was a phonetician and writes beautifully for language teachers. If this book had only been called a practical introduction to English pronunciation, it should and would have sold in millions, but unfortunately he called it phonetics rather than pronunciation. Now I'll read out the whole quote, which ends up with this thing saying stress is initiator power. And incidentally, when he talked about the initiator, he meant the respiratory system, the things which initiates sounds in speech. So Catford said, the fact that stress is associated with pitch change and duration has led to some confusion. Is stress really pitch or duration or energy or what? Is the kind of muddled question that has often been asked. The answer is that from a general phonetic point of view, stress is initiator power. So it's all about the respiratory system. So why aren't we teaching that? Why are we teaching our students to clap? Why are we teaching them to say things louder when what we should be teaching them is gestures with their respiratory system? Because this is what native speakers do. And it's important to know why we're not doing it. And I think part of the reason is what we've got up on this slide here. This is a scale. You can't actually read the writing here, so I've enlarged it on the right-hand side. This is a scale of the pressures that we can create with our respiratory system. So blowing a trumpet is right up here if you want to blow a trumpet loudly. Sniffing up or sucking up through a straw is somewhere down here. And there's a 0 point here where we're making no effort at all with our respiratory systems. And if you look at this part of the diagram enlarged over here, the thing you'll notice is that conversational speech for an adult hardly taxes the respiratory system at all. By the time we get to be adults, we're so expert at speaking that we can do it without making any effort at all. I don't feel that I'm making big stresses with my respiratory system while I'm talking to you now, because I'm so absolutely expert and practiced at it. So because we haven't made ourselves sensitive as teachers to what we're doing, we don't teach this to our students. But like everything else about pronunciation, in order to get it, one has to hyperarticulate to begin with. You know, when you're learning a new sound, you have to make a big effort to put your tongue in the right position, and then when you've got it, it becomes effortless. And similarly, using the respiratory system for stress involves the same thing. We have to get our students to actively do it, being present to their abdominal muscles and the other parts of the system, and then they can integrate this into their speech normally. So, if we're going to be doing this work with our students, it's important that we understand what it is that's going on with our respiratory system producing stress. And these are a couple of pictures of the anatomy. This is the chap on the right. You can see his lungs are up here, his windpipe. The lungs sit on top of the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle, and the lungs sit on top of it. And to inspire, you use the diaphragm, in fact, and you use these other muscles here on the right-hand side. The muscles up here are inspiratory muscles. And there's sometimes a little bit of confusion in people's mind about the role of the diaphragm. So I have got one picture which just shows the diaphragm here. Here we've got a side view, so the person's head would be on the top. This is the front of his chest. This is the back of his chest. And you've got the diaphragm sitting in the middle, adopting this dome-type shape. Now, muscles can only contract. Muscle fibers can only contract. So when the diaphragm is in its dome shape and the fibers contract, it flattens. And when the diaphragm flattens, it creates more space above, air is pulled in, and for that reason, the diaphragm is an inspiratory muscle. We use it to breathe in with. But you can't actually push out with the diaphragm. The way that the diaphragm can regain its dome-shaped position, the only way that can happen is if it's pushed from below. If the abdominal contents push upwards, and it's exactly like having a tube of toothpaste over here on the right-hand side. If you squeeze at the bottom, if you squeeze your belly down here, that pushes the contents up. And in the case of a toothpaste tube, toothpaste comes out of the top. And in the case of a human, what happens is that the diaphragm pushes the lungs, and the lungs push air out at the top here.